Well, welcome back, everyone. We're back after Thanksgiving here, and we're talking today, Teaching Talk 59. Can't believe it's 59. Next week, we'll have the last one for the quarter, number 60, and that will be winter quarter prep. So any issues you have getting ready for winter, I know I have a couple new instructors that I need to reach out to and figure out. I've got an equivalency still we're waiting on here, and then some other things. So there's a lot happening with winter quarter. Hopefully our enrollments will be good. And we'll use next week at noon to talk specifically about any of those winter quarter needs, getting ready with your classes and so forth. So today we'll talk about two topics. The first is just to review Zoom a little bit, because as Justin mentioned here, we're always getting these updates. And just today I was logging on and I was like, oh, there's a new update. And so have to download that. And some of the updates are major and others are just real minor bug fixes or tweaks. So it's just good to stay on top of it. And I'll show you how that's done in a second as a review. And then the second part of our talk today will be more on the kind of the pedagogy of class lectures. I think a lot of us are doing class lectures now, so we'll just talk a little bit about what you cover, the length of it, using either YouTube or Canvas Studio or other means. And then maybe getting into like interaction and analytics. How do you get students to actually engage with your lectures? How do you figure out if they are engaging? There's a couple ways to do that through Canvas, as well as Play Posit and maybe Canvas Studio. And then the idea of mixing things up, adding demos, whiteboards, and second cameras. And so I don't forget today, if any of you want, you can, we have loaner whiteboards available. And I was using this actually to talk about discrete versus continuous variables. And I actually find it's kind of fun. These are double-sided and they come with pens and erasers. And so if you want one of these, you could just go to the library. Any of the folks at the library will check one out for you just using your LTCC library card. And I think it's great. Like, I'll just get an idea in the middle of my lecture and I'll start, jotting it down. And for me, it feels more interactive, just almost like I'm in a classroom and I have that whiteboard in a classroom. So we'll talk about lecture today as well. So the handout here, and I'll link it with the YouTube video if I remember to do that, try to remember to do that. I have a couple resources here. So the first resource is you can click on this and it'll take you to the updates page for Zoom. Depending on the client that you have for Zoom, if you're using iOS with Mac, if you're doing anything with PC, or if you do Linux, which very few people I think use Linux, but you can download any of those clients. And one of the confusing things about Zoom is that you're always interacting with two versions. So if you go to zoom.us on your web browser like Safari, you get that version of Zoom, and that typically has everything that includes your meeting setups. Like if you're trying to create a new meeting, you always do that from the web version, and you could schedule a meeting here and then it'll list your meetings, and this is where I typically go to start my meetings. The second version of Zoom is the version, it's hard to show you this, but it lives on your computer just like a Microsoft Word program or PowerPoint or whatever. And this is where you do your updates actually. So I'll show you in a second how you do that update. But when you're getting ready to update, you could click on, again, this page on the resource page, and then you can also click somewhere on here about the different version updates and what exactly each update provides to you. So if you click on your version, like Mac for me, it'll tell me the latest version, which is just 2 days ago, November 28th, has all of these new features. And some of this may not make sense to you. I mean, one that's brand new is slide control. And this is kind of interesting. So you can actually share. So if we're co-presenting at a conference, I could hand either one of you control of the slide deck if we're doing PowerPoint or Google Slides or Keynote. So that's actually pretty neat. So if you're doing a lot of collaborative group-based stuff, even with your students, some of this I think is going to be a little more user-friendly and interactive. So this will tell you all the features. And then if you update to the most current version, all the previous updates are also included in that. So you can look at what they did on November 15th and October 25th. And you see here, it's generally every couple of weeks they're doing a new update. So it's really important to do that. And then if you want your students to have the latest features, also remind them, hey, make sure you do your Zoom updates. And there are some ways to do auto updates and so forth. So I'll just show you real quick here on a video I recorded. This was just this morning, so this will take you through the whole process of doing the update. And I'll just kind of walk you through this. I know there's a lot of windows. So I go to check for updates, and then I click on I can read exactly what is being developed or shared as far as the new stuff, new features. And then I click on the update button here. And again, if you're doing Windows, it's different process, but same idea. And this is for a Mac. It just shows you that you have to give the permission to install it for everybody or just yourself, put in your password and so forth. And once you have that, yeah, this is the latest version. And then you hit close, and then it will tell you here. This is new, by the way. They have on here slow or fast. And so
I think it came out 2 days ago. Is that right?
2 days ago, yeah. So that's another new thing. So you can decide when you do updates if you want all the features, or I guess if your computer isn't so fast, you can choose the slow version. So that's brand new, and I probably need to read up on that. So that's the update process. It's fairly straightforward. Again, you don't have to go through and read all the release notes, but some of these are fairly major. And like this morning, I logged on and I saw slide control, and I was like, what is that? So I think over time, hopefully like Canvas, they add new features based on user input and what people are looking at for having new features. So any questions about updates? Go ahead.
Say that there was auto update. You can set it to do it automatically.
Yeah, I believe if I go to my zoom.us here, I think somewhere here, if I hit check for updates, I think, okay, I thought it was going to allow me to check auto updates. Maybe it's under preferences. Zoom preferences. Let's see if it comes up there. Zoom updates. There we go. Yeah, so if you go to Zoom, not zoom.us, go to your desktop version, click on General at the top. The last choice is automatically keep my Zoom up to date. The weird under Zoom US. No, it's under your like desktop program. The weird thing about that though is this morning I've had that checked for ever since we've been using Zoom. It didn't auto update for me. I had to do it manually. So that's kind of weird. I'm not sure. So you might still have to go in and update it. Because what I did was I went to my window here that says check for updates. Actually, this is on zoom.us, this one. I have both open. It's kind of confusing. And it says I'm up to date, but I had to do that manually, even though I have automatically keep my Zoom up to date. So I don't know, I'd say Solange, just check your current version because, for an instructor, you definitely want to have all those bells and whistles in case you need them. So
I update as I get it. I already updated to this latest version.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, well, I'll go on, and then if there's anything that's visual, I'll just kind of describe it. So right now I'm just looking at the handout. And let me put in one more time in the chat. I think when you leave a meeting, sometimes you lose access to the handout, so we'll put it again. So we looked a little bit at immersive view, and immersive view is kind of tricky because the students have to have the current version of Zoom, and I think it might drain computers a little bit more. So unless you're doing something fun as an experiment, I don't know if you really want to try immersive view. I haven't done it with my students, but you could give it a shot. I want to mention that the idea of the Zoom sub-account, for a lot of you, if you've signed up for a Zoom account, sometimes there's a waiting period. That sometimes you don't get access to Zoom, and then you often connect back with me, and I try to connect you back to the state folks. Well, there's a real good chance that in the future we'll host our own Zoom sub-account locally. That will allow us to auto award people accounts, and it will also allow us a full set of features. And specifically, I'll show you some of these. Zoom has their own set of apps, just like we have apps on our phones and stuff. And the only way we're going to be able to use these would be to have our own hosted Zoom sub account. And just yesterday, I talked with Joshua Smith, who's our new IT director, excited to work with him. And he said there's probably a good possibility that we'll be able to move to it. We're just looking at the impact on the institution, and is it going to be a lot of requirements for people in IT to help faculty and staff and so forth. But I think it looks like it won't be that case. And if that's true, we'll have access to all these various apps. And this could be kind of cool. So you could do team games, you could do virtual backgrounds, and I think it'll actually be pretty cool to check some of these out. So I'm hoping we'll be able to do that. If that happens, I would suspect winter quarter would probably be the earliest. And I'll keep you up to date on that and let you know, particularly with these Zoom apps, once we go to a Subaccount, how these work and how you can add them to your Zoom account. So 2 other resources to mention. If you click on these images here, this will take you to the Zoom and video workshops and resources. So you just click on any of these if you want to learn the top 10s or how to sign up for Zoom. Just click on those and that will take you to the video or the sign up page that's very specific to that information. And then this is the second one, is the TNL tips, which doesn't just cover Zoom, but it has Zoom, Canvas, and a lot of other things that we've been talking about here, particularly as we had that late start in fall quarter with the fires and smoke and everything else that we've been dealing with. Sort of, we're waiting for the plague next, and I don't know, sort of. We've definitely been challenged in fall quarter for sure. So those are additional resources. And then just wanted to close this section before we talk about lectures in your DE class. Sort of your highs and lows for Zoom. For me, I've mentioned this before. I've struggled just with getting students to engage on Zoom if they attend, and then even before that point, actually get them to attend. So I would almost think about bonus points, and I've done a little bit of that, but still I've had very few takers for Zoom tutorials, Zoom office hours, Zoom lectures. So just wondered what both of your experiences were with getting students to engage with you on Zoom. Have you been successful? Yeah, go ahead.
Great. The students who are Zoom savvy have joined me in office hours, and some evenings they seem to be responsive to being able to work with me on Zoom. But out of 20 students, I'd say that would be 5. And the rest of them I've never heard. I offer every night, every office hour on Tuesdays, and I've never heard from any of them. And I'm always available. So I wonder why I've not heard from them.
Yeah. My experience is identical with launch. I've had 3 or 4 maybe meet with me, just one-to-one arranging a meeting for Zoom. But it was usually because of some major issue that we needed to talk about or something.
Right.
But yeah, in terms of just, having the office hours every Tuesday, the open office hours, for the whole class. Not a single person has joined or responded to that.
Right.
That seems to be the norm, just, anecdotally, not really collecting data, but just talking with colleagues. That seems to be the norm, unless the exception might be like language classes where they have to phone in or Zoom in and do their, language practice. The other one might be, I don't know if Mark Williams in his voice classes has students sing on Zoom, but if you had that, an actual requirement, which is tricky, we've talked about this, that the Chancellor's Office was saying, if we require anything on Zoom, we have to have a backup assignment, because the idea is that during COVID, students' schedules have shifted, etc. And as a result of that, we're supposed to have, a backup option. So I always have it as optional, but then I discover, like both of you, that students just don't want to join on Zoom. And then when I've done a few of these, I'll get like 2 or 3 students, and they're not really engaging, and it's kind of uncomfortable because I framed it as, okay, I'll do this as a lecture, but then I'll interact with you because I want it to be like a classroom. But kind of like some of your classroom lectures, it for me felt very dead, and I just was like, oh, okay, I'm forcing them to speak and they don't want to speak. So, and that leads into this topic of lectures, because I think if you try to make your lectures interactive, you sometimes struggle with the fact that students don't want to speak up in those interactive lectures or Zoom sessions. So yeah, just really tricky, I think, just dealing with this. And I don't know if either of you have any thoughts. Do you think it's related to COVID and a lot of us are doing so much Zoom that people are, students are tired of Zoom, or they just are shy, or
No, I feel that it's not COVID based. I feel that
okay.
the students are shy about Zoom and
Mhm.
don't want to participate.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. In my experience, the reason, so a few students actually told me why they couldn't join, and they said it's
Oh,
just because they work a full-time job during the day, and then
okay.
they have other classes, like they're full-time students, and they're taking either other DE classes, or they're actually taking classes on campus, and so they just basically don't have the time because they work like early in the morning to the afternoon or evening, and then they jump into the other classes.
Yeah.
There was a few of them
Yeah.
that said they had an overlapping class. Like I I had my office hours on like a Wednesday at like 6 p.m.
Hmm.
or something, 5 or 6 p.m. And one student said they couldn't join because they had an overlapping class. So I switched it to Thursday.
Okay.
Second student said, "Oh, I have a class that overlaps with that time." And then I put it on Tuesdays, and I had a third one say that they have a class. So I think it's just a mix.
Yeah.
I think it's a mix of all kinds of things, like working other classes, and then
Yeah.
also some that are available are probably just kind of shy to just, that's why they take
Yeah.
a PE class so they wouldn't have to interact with anybody. I don't know.
I really believe that
Right.
it's not COVID
Yeah.
based.
Yeah. I think those are all good reasons. I think, you're both saying this, like students expect, okay, I want to do asynchronous, and then now the instructor's asking me to participate. But the way I did it as more as help. And again, I'm concerned about my students with their projects, and so I said, okay, I'll do this. I think it was a Tuesday evening, maybe 7 or something like that, or 6. No one showed up. And so then I thought, oh, do I do another one? Do I do it during the day? And I think you could try that out. You could do a couple of things. You could mix it up. You could do an evening, a Monday, and then you could do another one. Try to go opposite potential like LTCC teaching blocks. And if you ever want that, it's on the website. You could look up teaching blocks. Although I would say that most of our students, just anecdotally again, are not taking face to face just based on our face to face numbers. So in the old days, we lived and died by those teaching blocks, and we would say, okay, there's always, the Tuesday, Thursday, 11 to 12:50. So, if you schedule or do things during that time, all the Tuesday, Thursday students taking those classes, whatever those are, during those blocks will be unavailable. And so you try a different time block. Now, I think with more flexibility, it might be what Justin was getting at here, the work schedule. So if you have people working nights versus days, you could try mixing it up and try one Zoom session during the day, another one a different day of the week, maybe later in the week or something, and do that in the evening. So I don't know. It's kind of tricky.
What I've tried to do is I try to make myself available to individual students. I'll send them an inbox,
Okay.
Canvas inbox, and
Yeah.
say that I'm available,
Mhm.
if they'd like to meet.
Yeah. That's a great idea. That's what I'm doing with the projects for my one class, because I feel like it's just too hard to get people together at the same time, as you're both discovering. So that's another way of doing it for sure. I think that it's just it's so tricky with everyone's schedule, and I think that the challenge, what Justin was getting at too, is you sign up for a class and you think it's asynchronous, but then if you want to increase that interactive quality, we've talked about this in other teaching talks. What are some things you can do? I mean, I think for me personally, there's only so much you can do with a text-based discussion. It reminds me, I'm dating myself, but back in the day when I grew up on video games, it was games like Zork, and this game Zork, it was very limited. It was an adventure, I think, in a castle, and you would type text. And then there were a few commands you could do, like you could, turn left or turn right. And then based on what you typed in, it would spit back to you the text. And in those days, that was considered interactive for a game. But in today's day and age, we want to move beyond text. And one way to do that is with audio and video. And we'll talk about in a second some additional options with Canvas Studio, doing the quizzes, doing the annotations. And Play Pause It is a very full-featured app that we have access to through the Chancellor's Office in Canvas. But it's a pretty big learning curve. It's very full-fledged, but you have to do a lot to get up to speed to learn it. But I feel like we could take advantage of some of those resources if students don't want to do Zoom sessions, because to be quite honest, there's only so much you can do with static asynchronous text that you're typing on your discussion boards. I think they're great, but I just don't think they're as spontaneous as us getting together over Zoom like we are now, and doing Q&A and having a free form discussion. So that's my main concern with Zoom, with non-Zoom based discussions like our Canvas discussion boards. So yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that kind of issue of like making things more interactive. But I think that's the reason we would push using Zoom in our classes, to make the interaction a little more meaningful for students and for us, frankly. So
If
yeah.
they replied, if they connect and participate, but they're not.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I had
Right.
a student
So
this
yeah.
morning tell me that there's an instructor that has not appeared at all in their DE class. No feedback on their assignments, no
Uh,
offerings of office hours or meetings on Zoom, nothing.
uh,
Absolutely.
uh,
She has no idea who he is or what he looks like.
oh wow, that is
Nothing.
not good. Yeah, we've had some issues with that in the past, and I won't get into it, but yeah, definitely that's been a concern of mine with the quality of DE instruction, is that you look at someone's class and you realize there's no interaction. And of course, accreditation standards and Title V standards, it basically says in the law that we have to have meaningful interaction between ourselves and our students, and then the students have to meaningfully interact with each other. So that's really hard to do if you don't do any feedback on discussion boards, or you don't do any Zoom sessions. You could do feedback on grading, but students are not interacting with each other for obvious reasons, for FERPA privacy issues, on each other's own graded material, unless you do tutorials or what do you call them, workshopping, like in English classes. If you do creative writing, sometimes students will sometimes give feedback on other students' projects, kind of as a workshopping opportunity. But yeah, you have to have interaction in your DE class. It's the rule, it's the law, whatever you want to say. Yeah.
None. She will do the assignments, essay
Yeah.
assignments, and get
Hmm.
zero feedback, just a
Wow.
grade. And I'm like, well, how are you supposed to learn if you don't get the feedback from the instructor?
Yeah. 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 I'm certainly not, trying to say like, you should tell the student to turn in the instructor, but it might be the kind of thing. We've had this happen in situation in the past, and Justin knows about this, where once enough students let, say, the instruction office know and say, hey, this instructor, I'm not learning anything, or I'm not getting feedback. Once there's a critical mass of students who contact, say, the deans or the instruction office, then hopefully something can happen. And in some cases, it might be a form of redress where we're just saying, hey, you didn't know this, so can you please improve, and start giving feedback to your students? Because I think sometimes, just like maybe some students honestly don't know what plagiarism is, I think maybe, we hire a new instructor and they don't have a mentor, they don't have someone they can rely on as far as a full-time department lead or chair, and they really don't know, because maybe in other districts, or maybe at like University of Phoenix or one of those schools where it's more for profit, they're okay with a correspondence-based class and not a more interactive class. So I'm saying there could be honest mistakes being made by those instructors, and hopefully there's opportunities to do some remediation and help them out a little bit. So you might just encourage the student, hey, reach out to I don't know, the instruction office, and let them know if it's a real concern. I don't know, Justin, do you think that's too you know how would you handle that if you heard a situation like that? Because I feel like I'm sort of encouraging the student to let someone know, but how else do we improve that classroom situation? I don't know.
And no, I agree. That's what I would do. I would advise the student to contact the instruction office.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I really can't add any more to what you said. I wholeheartedly agree. And I also agree with what you said about, the lack of having like a mentorship system here can contribute to that. If there's a new instructor and they think, oh, well, if it's kind of online only for the students and we don't really see each other, then they sort of take on that same mentality of, I just have to do a minimal amount of work. like you and I have talked about,
Yes.
just set the thing up, set the 12 weeks up and let it run. And I'll just grade stuff when it comes in. And then that's it. So,
Yeah, that
yeah,
can't be right.
that honestly might be the mentality of the instructor. So I would encourage a student to contact instructor and let instruction then contact you.
I mean, I'm on every week. I'm online. I'm on inbox. I
Yeah.
constantly
Yeah.
inbox. I'm always
Mhm.
sending messages, telling them, giving them updates, and responding to every single assignment that's put in. It's just like I
Mhm.
put in a lot of work in this DE
Yeah.
class.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I do as well. I'm pretty much 7 days a week in there.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, because I'm responding to discussions that people post every day throughout the week. So,
Exactly.
and then on Mondays they're not doing discussions yet because the week just started for me. But
Exactly.
I'm grading from last week. So, yeah, it's a 7-day week job.
Yeah.
Yep.
I was going to say something back to trying to create more interaction. So
Yeah.
I have an idea. Feel free to push back against
Sure.
it if it doesn't seem feasible. But something that I've done before when I taught in person um, was I would set up a mock debate for my class. So
Yeah. Love
basically
it.
I would have a particular topic. So like for instance, when I taught Homer's Odyssey, and the topic was about the character of Penelope, and basically there was a question where it was kind of like a two-sided question, basically. What you either thought A or B, and I asked everyone to tell me to email me what their view was on that discussion. It was about split in half between people that thought A and B, and then I had them prepare for the study for the debate, and then a couple weeks before the debate, I told them that if your view is view A, you're going to argue for view B in the debate, and vice versa. So they were kind of shocked, but encouraged them to then kind of genuinely learn the other view. So I had them do that, and it was it was a good outcome. They loved it. They had students came up afterwards and told me they changed their view because they actually had to critically think about it, and they loved the experience and so on. So that's something that I've always wanted to implement in almost every class I teach now because it was just such a great experience for everybody. So I'm wondering for something like this DE class, maybe it's not possible to have one debate at one particular time because students aren't available, but it might be worth in the beginning, the first week of class saying, hey, we're going to have this debate in like week 10 or whatever, this mock debate, but we're going to have it on 3 separate times during the week, depending on availability. So it might be like 5 people per day or per time. So you kind of email everyone out in advance and say, I'm going to need to know by week 3 or 4 or whatever, which of those 3 times you'll be available. And then also here's the topic we're going to be discussing. Let me know in advance to which sort of what your view is on that topic. I guess you don't have to switch sides if you don't want to, but that might be a way then of, and then that week you just host 3 of those Zoom sessions, maybe one in the morning on a weekday, one in the evening, kind of one in that around noon. And then that might allow, chunks of the class to come together and basically have a discussion with one another. Do it for like 45 minutes or something. Don't take up too much of their time. I don't know. It's worth a thought. What do you think about that? Or if it's not a mock debate, you could just organize it as a discussion or something else.
I love it. I love it. I've like you, I've done debates. I remember in one of my criminology classes, we would debate like gun control or capital punishment, and I really liked it. And particularly where maybe you make it you randomize who's on which side, because I know I taught a class ages ago. I kind of regretted it because it was very one-sided. It was a class on drugs and society. And, I discovered very quickly, wow, everybody in Tahoe, this was before the wave of marijuana legalization, but everybody, they just were all pro, yes, legalize. And so the challenge there was I couldn't find anyone against it in Lake Tahoe. So I think randomizing who's on which side could be interesting. What I'm curious about, though, is your idea of making this work, because really what I'm talking about here with DE class lectures is you have the face-to-face version, and it's more interactive. If I record a video of me doing a lecture, obviously the only way to interact with that is to have them post a discussion board topic after they watch it. Again, in later teaching talks, we could talk about Play Pause It. Canvas Studio, through the quiz feature or the annotation feature, allows you at particular points as a student to type a comment, or I think you could even upload a video comment. What would be cool with your idea, though, for a debate would be to do it in this DE format. Again, the scheduling could be a challenge. I was even thinking of, could you do it asynchronous? And maybe you could say, like, you would, as the instructor, lead off the debate topic, capital punishment, and here's what you need to address. You could break the students into two different groups, pro and con, if you're doing it that way. And then you could have the students each upload their debate point. So for 5 minutes or 4 minutes, use Canvas Studio, upload your pro point, upload the other student does the con point. That way it could be asynchronous. Now the problem is, of course, if you've done like Lincoln Douglas, I remember doing debate back in, I think, middle school ages ago. And, part of it was that interaction and rebuttal phase. And so I think like doing it asynchronous wouldn't be a pure debate, but it would at least be students getting, some interaction with each other and then showing their faces via Canvas Studio. I think you're right, Justin. If you do it synchronous, you're going to have to break it into different time periods and say, okay, maybe 6 of you will join Wednesday at 6 p.m. to 7. Another 6 will join based on your schedules Tuesday at noon or something, or Thursday at noon. The scheduling aspect, I think, could be kind of a nightmare. You could use the polling apps out there, and just on Canvas, set up a quiz, not for points, but just do it as a poll or a survey. And then you could try to figure out which students could meet at which time. But the biggest nightmare would just be the scheduling, I would think. I love the idea. I think it'd be awesome to do it in a DE class. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, that the scheduling would be the hardest part. But if you just started on early, give them a heads up on week 1, like, hey, we're doing this in week 10 or whatever. So we need to, like, as soon as possible, you need to let me know what your availability is. I think you'd have plenty of time to follow up on maybe people that aren't responding or something, to try to figure that all out. The other question with that is, though, you might know more about this because with the chancellor's office and so on. With the DE class, are we allowed to sort of require them to be available at a certain time? Or does that kind of go completely against the whole idea of a DE class?
Supposedly, let me see. Let me look this up here. I'm just going to look up this. There was a legal opinion, and so I may not be able to find it. I'll probably have to share that later. I just typed in Zoom. Let me just type in legal, because it was a legal opinion. Legal advisories. Okay. Let's see. Well, this one was for on-camera requirements. So on October 19th, the Chancellor's Office issued a legal opinion on privacy laws. Let me actually put this up in the chat here. Is it permissible for faculty to require students to keep their cameras on during live synchronous online instruction? Here's the conclusion, jump to it. Faculty cannot require students to have their webcams turned on during class. Cameras should not be they should be presumptively, optional for live synchronous online classes. And then this is a guide. Here's how you could approach it. So, it's really tricky, and I think this is the actual legal opinion. I think one of the reasons for this was concerns about, the page has moved, concerns about privacy. If students have their cameras on and maybe they're embarrassed about their living situations or something, or it's not quite private. So that's the one issue. The other issue is I thought there was a second legal opinion about, and maybe it was just the cameras required to be on during a synchronous Zoom conversation. But I thought there was a second one specific to like assigning points for a synchronous Zoom session. So the way I get around it, and you could come up with your own way, is I make it optional. So what I said for my class here, let me see if I have it here. Week 1 optional Zoom. I think what I said on here was you could do one or the other. Join us for an optional Zoom. You may use the 45-minute attendance to replace week 1 open discussions for 15 points. So my recommendation would be, now, of course, what's going to happen if it's a debate on Zoom and you have another option, most students won't pick maybe the Zoom option because they don't want to be on camera. So I knew some instructors years ago before we were doing Zoom that they would have the makeup option be a little more, how can I say it, onerous. Like it would be a 5-page paper versus joining on the Zoom. So the 5-page paper maybe is going to be harder for students. So therefore, most of them would want to do the Zoom session. But I think you would back yourself up because you would say, well, look, there's an option. If the students don't want to do the debate on Zoom, they can always write the 5-page paper. So I make it optional, and that's my way around this legal requirement. The question would become, what if the student participates in the debate and they don't want to have their camera on? And I guess you could address that too and say, well, how can I? Is audio okay? I would think for a debate, audio would be better than nothing, right? If it was just audio and the camera was muted, so to speak. So I don't know.
Yeah, I was thinking about the audio too, but the trouble is, in my experience with teaching synchronous classes on Zoom, is that if one student or I mean, if one student is gonna have the camera off, then they're all gonna have the camera off.
Right.
So that kind of
Exactly.
So that's kind of an issue. That's interesting. I like the option of giving or I like the idea of giving them an option, like you just said. I would also be worried about maybe 3 students wanting to do the debate and then the rest not wanting to do it. And you can have a little Zoom session with just a few students, but I would like to see more than just a handful turn up for the debate or whatever. But it is interesting. That is a good idea, though, giving them an option.
Yeah. And maybe you could give multiple options. I was thinking like my idea of this asynchronous debate, even though it's not really debate, but if a student's unable to attend, but they record their pro or con position on capital punishment and they upload that to an assignment page or a discussion board, they've at least, they've engaged with media. They've learned how to use Canvas Studio to record their own video. They've shared their position with the class. So that would maybe not be as great as the synchronous debate over Zoom, but it's better than, maybe just turning in a paper on the same topic, a position paper. So you could think about like different options available. But I just make it optional because I figure like, well, you get points for this, but if you really hate Zoom or you can't make the Zoom session, which was, I forget what day of the week that was, you could still do this synchronous or asynchronous discussion board and just type your text response. So I feel like if you have options, you protect yourself as an instructor because, that there is this legal opinion from the chancellor's office, and that is, so to speak, the law that we have to follow. So it's not ideal. I agree with a lot of people who've said like we should be able to require it to be a live class. Now I've participated. I was reviewing a art instructor's class, and there was amazing participation. It was like, I don't know, over 10 students. They were all engaged, and I think the reason for it was a tutorial. And this is why I'm saying here, maybe to make things more interactive. I think a lot of students think, well, if they're taking a religion class or an anthropology class, you can do that all asynchronous. But really, we could encourage them to gain from our expertise and conversation in a synchronous Zoom session, just like a student taking an art class. I think there's an assumption because an art class is hands-on, or maybe Solange's class, you really want to learn audio mixing or video production, you have to log on and look at the technology live as it happens. So maybe those of us in the humanities and social sciences that get a bad rap for it's just a bunch of ideas, we could do more things where like, even something as simple as the whiteboard is a way to diagram something, to explain something, to make it a little more interactive. What I've done with I'll show you my lecture here. I've tried to include more, I could turn the sound down here. I've tried to include more demos, and I'll just show you an example of that if I'm doing something live. I don't know if this one has it. I just have some live demos of my sound stuff. This is an example of doing something live where I'm working with music on the computer and I have another camera set up and I'm playing the keyboard. So it's my way to kind of make the lecture more interactive, hopefully, in the sense that they're watching it and something's happening on the screen. They're not necessarily interacting with it in real time, but I think it's a little more than just me, the talking head on the screen, and maybe my screen share going on. So any ideas that either of you have to do more of that interactive lecture or interactive media in your classes to make students engage a little bit more? Like any tricks for doing this kind of thing, whether it's a Zoom class or one of your lectures you record for later viewing by your students?
Well, in my class, if I have a project class that is synchronous, there's a part, the project is their final project. They work on it all quarter. So every week there's an element that needs to be met, and we meet twice a week and we talk about these elements, and then we meet these elements every week. And so it works, and my students were attending. But in the asynchronous classes, the DE classes, there's no way to make your students get on Zoom or interact. They are on their own time with their own schedules. And so we as instructors have to conform to their schedules and their needs.
I think that's very true. I think in a big sense, as you're both getting at today, you have to really think about student schedules. I was thinking there are ways to do this asynchronously. We can talk about Play Posit. Again, it's really full-fledged, and I personally find it a little challenging. So one easier technology available to all of us is through Canvas Studio. This, I think, could create more interaction that is asynchronous and that could be, related to points, assigning points. So what you could do is go to any of your videos on Canvas Studio and then click Create Quiz. And then once you create a quiz, you're requiring students to interact with your video at specific points. You could decide whether you want to hide the questions or require the students to watch the video through. So if you don't hide the questions, they'll see a little marker when the video question comes up on your video. If you hide it, then the student has to watch basically the entire video. And that's a nice way to kind of force them to interact with it. Hopefully I'm not going to drain the computer here, but you would just add at a certain point in the video a multiple choice true or false, or multiple answer question. And then you type that in, and then you can create a question feedback. So I really feel like Canvas Studio allows us to create some of that interaction. The second way to do that, you probably saw that when I clicked on that same video, is you could do an annotation. And so you click on the video, and up at the top, sorry, now I'm forgetting where it was. I actually, this is set up for annotations. So you would type in annotations or comments at particular segments in the video. You could do this, your students could. And then that way you're creating a bit of a conversation happening in the video. Again, these markers will pop up. It'll show you the user. And then that's another way to kind of encourage a little more interaction with maybe one of your lectures or some media that you've uploaded to Canvas Studio. So I think this is actually pretty good. This is not synchronous, but it's at least interactive, where you see the user, you see their comments, and then it's one way to encourage students to learn the technology behind Canvas Studio. So I don't know, have either of you tried this out with either a video quiz or annotations with Canvas Studio?
No, I have not.
No, I haven't done that. I've included discussion, quiz, test questions that come from content that is only in the lecture. Because I indicate that all assignments are made up of content coming from the textbook reading, ancient text readings, lectures, so on and so forth, media tasks. So basically, they could potentially just not know the answer to several questions if they just don't watch lectures or don't do the media tasks or don't do one of the readings or something. And so that's kind of been my way of trying to ensure that they're reading. But I can tell oftentimes when there'll be a quiz and not everybody, but a lot of people are missing a fairly easy question, and it's the same question, and it's something that's strictly from like the lecture, strictly from one of the readings. I could just tell they didn't watch it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you could totally tell. I had one of those recently where it was a question about who appeared in this particular documentary, and almost everybody missed it. I'm like, they didn't watch the documentary. So that's I think that's one way that you could replicate. In the old days, doing a face-to-face class, we would maybe have a hint. Like, I always remember the class before Thanksgiving, if I was teaching in the old days when we didn't take the week off, Wednesday night class, 6 to 10. Oh, students did not want to be there. And then it's like, well, everyone's going to take off. So I would have some hints about the test or the quiz coming up after Thanksgiving break. And, it was one way to encourage students to really attend. We can actually do that. We can port that over to DE classes by saying, you have to watch my lecture. I'm not going to tell you where in the lecture, but I'll ask you a question on the quiz. And then, you can always tell who's watched that lecture video or not. So whether you're doing that through your own means, like this example, or doing it through annotations or a quiz in Canvas Studio, it's one way to really encourage students to interact with your videos. In my sample lecture that I have here, what I do is, and if you're doing this on Canvas Studio, there are, of course, ways to look at analytics. What I always do is, if it's a lecture video, when I create it on my YouTube account, I don't send it to all my subscribers. And the reason I don't do that is I want to be able to see how many views I have. I have a pretty good sense. Again, there are exceptions, but if there's 20 views, I might say, okay, well, a few of my students in my class are watching this video, because I know it's not my typical subscribers watching my YouTube. The other way to do that, of course, is go to Canvas Studio and to interact there with your students, and then use the analytics that we've talked about in previous teaching talks to get an assessment of, approximate number of students who are interacting or watching your lecture videos. And again, a lot of us have expressed frustrations if we create these lectures and they're really involved and we spend hours on them. We really hope that students just like would come to the traditional face-to-face class and listen to our lecture. We hope that students are listening to our video lectures that we're sharing with them on Canvas Studio or YouTube via Canvas. So it's always challenging, right? Because we want students to watch the content we create, but then some students don't watch it. So how do we encourage that interaction? Do we create a quiz? Do we send out announcements? All of the above. One thing I've done, because I am really trying to increase just the number of students watching these videos, is I do multiple announcements. I will remind them, and then I put it in the module structure. So I do a announcement here. The week 10 lecture is now available, and then they could click on the video directly. When they go to week 10 on their module page, they also will get that reminder, if you will, where it says lecture for week 10. And then in my other class I'm teaching, I've done something different. They have what's called an open discussion, where they could pick any topic, either from the readings or from any of the media that I shared with them. What I try to do there to really encourage them to interact with the lecture is I have it at the header at the top of the page. If you are stuck on a topic, go ahead and click on the lecture here, watch it, and interact with the lecture and post on one of the ideas. The other thing I encourage you to do is to have those indices set up. It's very easy to do on YouTube, so you can click on the section specific to what you want to learn about, and then that way you don't have to watch the entire video if it's a really long lecture. I remember Solange, a couple weeks ago, we talked about this. You could also break your content into smaller chunks. So if you're lecturing on one topic, that could be one mini lecture. You could do another mini lecture. It's totally up to you as far as how you want to do that.
Right. Correct.
Yeah, go ahead, Solange.
I was going to say you could break up you could break up one subject into multiple lectures.
Yeah, exactly. So whatever works, again, for your content, and as far as mentioning what to cover in terms of your content, again, that's going to be up to you. I mix it up. I am the type of person that I like a little bit of content related to our readings. I also will mention the additional or bonus readings or media content I've shared with them, and then I'll take them in new directions. It might be some of the research I've done where I'll say, hey, this is an article I've written or some topic I lectured on, and I just want to give you a perspective on how a professional anthropologist publishes or does research. And so I'll share something additional to the textbook. I've never been the type of person that only lectures directly from the textbook. I find it a little boring personally, but that's just me. It's not a right or wrong. It's just my particular style and approach. I don't know how you do it, Justin. How do you cover content in your lectures?
So depending on how much time I have, like with this course I'm teaching now, I didn't have a whole lot of preparation time.
Yeah.
So I follow along the textbook very closely. Although
Yeah.
I'll just add stuff in that, like, for example, the book I'm using doesn't really it depends. It doesn't really talk about like women a lot. Maybe every now and then it'll get a little bit. So try to add stuff in on women in Middle Ages and so on, and or like Black studies. I'll add a whole thing on like Black people in the Renaissance and stuff. So I'll supplement. But I'll use that as my structure. I follow along, but I always supplement or will kind of quickly pass over something that I don't think is as important for them. So I use that as like a skeleton, basically.
Yeah, that's great.
And the other reason why I do that too is because yeah, I used to be able to view like when I remember taking classes and going, oh, the lectures are just right out of the textbook. Well, there's some people, depending on their learning style, where they just do not absorb information well if they're just reading the textbook.
Right.
And they need the visual, audio, kind of medium to learn. So I've kind of changed my view on that and kind of see that as a benefit.
Yeah.
But again, it just goes back to me trying not to do exactly, follow the textbook identical. I try to do something a little bit different.
Justin, when you are doing your lectures, do you have the lecture on the screen, or is it a talking head with you speaking?
Both. So I create PowerPoints. So I have a PowerPoint and then I have my image on the screen, like in the upper left corner or something.
Got it. Understood. Thank you.
Yeah. Something I wanted to ask you about, because you mentioned something that it's something I thought of before, but you mentioned about like kind of doing a review for a quiz or a test where, you're sort of dropping hints about information that might be on there, and that being an incentive to attend. So as I thought about this a while back, and I thought it might be worth if you do like a synchronous lecture through Zoom. In other words, rather than an office hour, you do like a lecture, but you're having trouble with students coming or attending. You could indicate that that you're going to do a review for your weekly quiz or the exam or whatever, and that might be after the lecture is given, that you'll have some time for a review, but that in post-production because maybe if you record it all for post-production, that you're not going to have that review uploaded to Canvas for them. So basically the incentive is if you want to hear the review for the quiz or the test, you have to come to the Zoom lecture, the session.
That's great.
Well, that's not fair to the students who can't make it.
Yeah, I just thought about that right now as I was.
Well, I think there's a way around it that would make it fair. I guess what I was suggesting is you could give students tips and encourage them to attend the lecture and say, hey, now when you're looking, at this concept in chapter 9, I really want to encourage you. You're guiding them a little bit, but let's just say the really good student who misses your lecture, as Solange was getting at, could still get full credit and let's say get a perfect score on that quiz or, get that question correct. But it's a little more digging they have to do in independent work. So you're guiding them and giving them more guidance by attending the lecture, but it's still fair that the student can still receive full credit on the quiz or assignment. You're just helping them along. So as an example of that, what I've done for my 3 written assignments in my Anthro class is I've created these tutorial videos, trying to find it here. And very specifically, I've said to them, let's see. I wanted to find that just to show you what it looked like. Class presentation recording. So, a student could to do their class presentation, watch this video and maybe do better based on understanding the techniques I'm talking about and the tips, but they could still get 100% or an A doing their final projects by not watching the video. So I think what Justin was getting at could still be fair, Solange, as long as the student could still doing their own work, albeit taking longer to do that studying. You're encouraging the student to attend the lecture, but it's still fair given that they could still find that material in the textbook or in the modules. Would that work?
Would the attending the lecture be recorded so the student who couldn't make it can see the lecture?
No, he was actually saying what you would do is, and by the way, the easy way to do that for those of you watching at home, not attending live today, you would just go to your Zoom and hit stop recording. What he was getting at was you would stop the recording and not have that lecture uploaded to Zoom, that last section where he's doing the review. He would have the first part of the lecture just be the lecture. The last part would be the review, but you would stop the recording or not upload that part of the recording. Isn't that what you were getting at, Justin?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And and then the other thing you could do too is if you are just doing like a 15-minute lecture, something short with them, 15, 20-minute deal, you could do it 2 days a week. It's not taking up much of your time. If you do a Tuesday and a Thursday one, that way if you can't make it on Tuesday, you can come to a Thursday one at a different time of the day, maybe even. So it just opens up the options. And so you just do the lecture twice, but you only record one of them that you can upload to Canvas for everyone. But yeah, that recording would not include the review. So you still have to come to one of the 2 live lectures to get the review.
Yeah,
Otherwise, you'll just get the lecture.
Yeah.
I feel that these are DE classes that there should be no required online time. Students should get full advantage of everything you offer, not live.
I kind of agree with that too. I mean, because that's kind of what they signed up for, right?
Correct.
But then again, you could do that option like I did for my class, and I abandoned it, albeit after week 1. But I said you can attend the Zoom for 45 minutes, and that will replace your text discussion grade on Canvas. Or you can attend a lecture grade or don't want to, type your discussions. So I agree with Solange, like make it so that you can earn the maximum possible points either way, whatever those options would be.
Just have alternatives, like you said.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you don't want to ever have anything live, maybe they can do something, or even you could record that review, and then the second option is if you just do the alternative online task sometime during that week, then you release the review to them or something as a reward.
Yeah.
It's
interesting. Yeah.
So there are some students who can't make a lecture. It isn't that they don't want to, they can't.
Right.
And they should have the ability to have the review, whether they make the lecture or not.
I think with the analytics, you can see who watched the video. So maybe if they, sorry, the dogs are.
That's okay.
So maybe if they, based upon the analytics, if they watch the recorded lecture, then they can have access to the recorded review or something like that.
No, they should have access to the recorded review, whether they watch the lecture. It has to be 100%.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
It has to be 100% for this.
This is, the other thing I was going to say is like, this debate predates Zoom and DE education. Back in the day when I first started teaching at the college in the late 90s, I remember, a lot of social science, humanities classes, we would require participation. So it was a face-to-face class, Wednesday night, 6 to 10. And I would do, I varied it up. I would sometimes do participation points. I would sometimes do participation plus attendance. It was a lot of tracking on my end, so I would have to learn my students' names, which was great. And then in my grade book, I would put a check, if they attended, and a plus if they meaningfully engaged with the class during our discussions. That I think was controversial at the time. Some people said, nope, you should be able to get an A in the class even if you never attended. And the example of that is a lot of our math instructors will say, you come to lecture if you want a tutorial. If you can ace the exams and you just come to the 3 exams during the quarter, you can get an A in a class. This is a philosophical debate, and I don't think we'll ever agree on what the right approach is. I would like to see us maintain the ability to require attendance and participation, but as far as DE is going right now, the chancellor's office has been saying, kind of upholding what Solange is getting at, you shouldn't have that requirement. There should be a backup option to do something asynchronous. So this debate will go on for sure. We can't answer it or solve it today by any means. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
Yeah.
So I was getting at is in terms of that participation.
Yeah.
Although it is DE, it is asynchronous. You still have to do the work, and part of doing the work
Yeah.
is watching the video, watching the task, doing the reading. So I feel like if you're going to offer sort of an extra aid for them to help them, they also have to basically take the class. So if they're not taking the class, they're not watching anything, they're not doing any readings or anything, then in other words, I could see that as participation. So
Yeah.
It's basically like points for participation.
I have participation as part of my grading
Oh, you do?
not in my DE class, only in my synchronous class, my Zoom classes and my live classes, but not in my DE classes. There is no participation grade. It is up to the student to be, but my class is weekly. They don't get access to the class, to the whole class at the beginning of the quarter. They only get access to the following week, and that's all they get is 1 week at a time. So that's part of it, but I don't grade participation in a DE class.
Yeah, I don't grade participation either. I was speaking in terms of rather than having participation points, that they have to watch the videos, or because the lecture video on recorded is part of the course. I mean, so if they're not going to watch it, maybe there's like you offer points for completing the task, actually watching the recorded lecture. Right. Because you can look at the analytics on Canvas and tell who watched it or not. Although they could fast forward to the end. Make it look like they watched it. But.
Or again, I would encourage us. I admittedly don't do a lot with the quizzes, but either the quiz or annotation feature in Canvas Studio, I think, could really solve a lot of these issues as far as just requiring, because it'll show with the little bubbles here, the different students who interact with the video. So you could just say you have to post one comment and interact with a part of my lecture. I don't care where it is in my lecture, but at some point you got to click and then do your interaction. And then again, you could click the insights, and as more people post, you'll get insights, and that'll be very easy for you to grade. If you want to do it formally, you could do a Canvas Studio quiz. So I think Canvas Studio actually could accomplish what we're talking about, at least some of this. I feel like it's a possibility.
Okay,
yeah.
Because they can do the video anytime.
Yeah. You do it anytime. And so again, back yourself up. And if you're worried about it, you're like, well, wait a second, am I going to get in trouble because a student will complain that they couldn't interact with this, or it wasn't fair because they couldn't complete the class as an asynchronous student? Then put in option 2. That's what I did. And I covered myself. So if a student said, well, I couldn't attend your Zoom lecture in week 1, well, you could still get 15 points by posting your discussion board post. So that way you've backed yourself up. I really would encourage you just to have like an optional assignment if you're worried about like not being fair or something, as Solange was getting at. So yeah.
Now we've gone over.
Yeah, we should. Why don't we close? This was great today. I will again share the video and share some of the handouts with everybody. And then next week we'll have our session just talking about winter quarter needs and any concerns that any of you might have. So great. All right. Well, thank you both for attending, and thank you those of you listening asynchronously at home to this video, and we'll talk again next week, same time, same Zoom place. So, all right. Thanks, everyone.